wow, just incredible. These awards are just so moving. So let's just one more round of applause for all of our award winners tonight. Steve, I don't know how your committee figured out how to pick these incredible winners, but thank you so much for all you've done in putting this all together. I want to thank the members of the Standing Committee on Gavel Awards and its screening committee for their incredible dedication in judging these entries. A number of the committee members are here this evening. I'd like you to stand and please join me in thanking them for all their hard work. I'm going to go a little off script as I introduce our featured speaker, Brooke Gladstone. You don't know this, but one of the privileges of being president of the American Bar Association is you get to pick the Law Day theme for the Public Education Division, and you also get to pick the speaker at this meeting. And what you don't know is that my husband Michael and I are kind of Brooke Gladstone groupies. We listen to On the Media at WABE in Atlanta, and it's on Sunday afternoons. And so after we listen to Meet the Press and all of that other depressing stuff, we get to hear what you have to say. So for those of you who don't know Brooke as well as I do, she's the managing editor and co-host of the long-running public radio series On the Media, syndicated through WNYC in New York to more than 400 stations nationwide. And so when I'm traveling, which as ABA president, you travel a lot, I still get to hear you. So each week it spends an hour investigating how the media shapes our worldview. Brooke is also the author of 2 books, including the just published The Trouble with Reality, a rumination on moral panic in our time. The New Yorker has called her book a battle plan for individuals anxiously watching the edifice of reality collapse. That's encouraging. In 2011, she also authored The Influencing Machine, and The Atlantic listed it as among the top 10 masterpieces of graphic nonfiction. Brooke has also written for the London Observer, the Boston Globe, Washington Post, and the American Journalism Review. She started her career in print media and then transitioned to public radio. In 1987, Brooke joined NPR as a senior editor of Weekend Edition with Scott Simon, another favorite of mine, and became senior editor of All Things Considered in 1989, another favorite of mine. A Knight Fellow at Stanford University studying Russian language and history. She was also NPR's Moscow-based reporter during the presidency of Boris Yeltsin. Afterward, she was NPR's first media correspondent. Brooke is the recipient of 2 Peabody Awards, a National Press Club Award, an Overseas Press Club Award, and a trio of Gracies. And I should add, a Silver Gavel. The Bench Press, an episode of On the Media, received last year's Silver Gavel Award for radio. Bench Press was an entire episode devoted to demystifying the U.S. Supreme Court and explaining how journalists cover it. So please join me in welcoming Brooke Gladstone.
I'm sure you want another speaker right now after everything you've heard and how moved you've been. But I just want to say, 60 years ago, when the ABA launched the Silver Gavel Awards for Media and the Arts, it made perfect sense. Freedom of speech and the rule of law being the twin pillars of democracy, and America was synonymous with democracy. Democracy ensured our freedom. What could go wrong? We are, after all, a great nation, an idealistic nation, put it another way, a delusional nation. In 1644, England was among the greatest of nations, and that year was when John Milton penned his screed against censorship, known as the Areopagitica. and he was yelling at the Parliament, and he said, "Lords and Commons, consider what nation it is whereof you are, a nation not slow and dull, but of a quick, ingenious, and piercing spirit, subtle and sinewy to discourse, not beneath the reach of any point the highest that human capacity can soar to. Let truth and falsehood grapple. In a free and open encounter, truth will win." Now, the reason why I mention Milton is because he inspired Thomas Jefferson, who later said, "Truth is great and will prevail if left to herself. She is the proper and sufficient antagonist to error and has nothing to fear from conflict." Oh, come on. The laws of human nature do not provide for the triumph of reason. And yet, these founding fathers were so convinced that wisdom and information would protect us from all of the illnesses that the flesh is heir to, that they created the First Amendment. And the First Amendment was to ensure that wisdom would always inform us, ensure that our press and speech would forever be free, because then and only then could we hold our leaders accountable to our shared ideas, our goals, and to the facts. Now, a lot of people ask me to comment on the president's attacks on the press. I think this is one room where I don't have to explain that this isn't an attack on the media, but on the very nature of truth. Accountability, he says, is bunkum. He tells his supporters that the entire institution of the free press is a special interest. Now, the sheer abundance of the president's lies demonstrates again and again that facts are disposable. They're confusing devices that do not serve us, that do not matter. By degrading the very notion of shared reality, Trump is trying to disable the engine of democracy. Because consensus is the bedrock of democracy, right? Consensus can only be reached if there are certain shared principles, maybe goals, but certainly a common pool of facts. But when truth is little more than an arbitrary personal decision, there's no common ground to be reached, and there's no incentive to look for it. It just becomes a kind of order of the jungle struggle. And that is probably the moral panic that people feel right now, the kind of fear that goes far beyond merely politics or even the election of a president that we may think may not be good for the country. Let's talk about the big winners. Evicted. It's about the poor and it's about social justice. Do not resist. It's about criminal justice. More perfect. It's about the codification of justice. Trapped. It's the defense of justice. I was talking to a woman for a piece we're running this week, a great sociologist at Penn, and she said that she hates the phrase pro-choice because it makes it sound like it's a personal choice, and the most important thing is to safeguard the choice. But we see what happens when we take away the opportunity while superficially preserving choice. She wants to use the phrase reproductive justice. And I think it's like all these other justices, how we need to start reframing. That's what my show does, how we have to start reframing these issues. What is justice? I looked it up. It's fairness, moral rightness, a scheme or system of law in which every person receives his or her due from the system, including all rights, natural or legal. Now, democracy. When I said that we were naive to think that facts on their own would do the trick, I think we have to extend that same naivete, if we still have it, to democracy. Here's a quote about democracy. Remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes itself and exhausts and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide. It is in vain to say that democracy is less vain, less proud, less selfish, less ambitious, or less avaricious than aristocracy or monarchy. Those passions are the same in all men and under all simple forms of government, and when unchecked, produce the same effects of fraud, violence, and cruelty. Individuals have conquered themselves, nations and large bodies of men, never. That was John Adams in 1814. Listen to the angry man. He says that democracy is merely a template, a structure as prone to human frailty as any other. Yet, it remains our commitment. Individuals may conquer themselves. Individuals may also surpass themselves. Either way, we have subscribed to a nation that adheres to that democratic code. It is in the dust, our obligation as citizens to repair and improve the nation in which we live. You know, a couple of weeks ago, no, it was probably a couple of months ago, a friend of ours, my husband is a journalist, I'm a journalist, a friend of mine who's a journalist, emailed and said, do you kind of feel like you've been practicing for this moment for 25 years? You know, I stand with Ellie. Right now, the law and the shattered or tattered hulk that is the good media have a job to do. And it's really hard, and it's kind of expensive. And if we don't do it, we're going to have such a big mess to clean up later. We will anyway, but we need to protect people when they are so vulnerable right now. We need to ring the alarm, and we need to bring lawsuits before the Koch brothers elect all the local judges and magistrates and all this. It's very easy to buy a judge election in a small place. It takes hardly any money. And the real work, the good work, obviously the only work, for good or ill, is being done on the local level. So that's pretty crucial. Anyway, I just want to say that I was so pleased to be asked here because I have never felt closer to the law than I do right now. I feel that we are marching in close formation, even though we may continually disagree. I mean, the fact is that a lot of people hate lawyers because they think all lawyers are the worst lawyers. A lot of people hate media for precisely the same reason. We are herding cats, we are an unruly mob, but I feel sometimes that ours may be the only two institutions that can provide any bulwark against the threats to our democracy. So thank you.